Have you ever looked at the stars and felt that burning ache inside the whisper that says you're meant for more? That was how Ara felt every single night. He lived in a crowded city, forest of concrete and noise where people ran faster than their dreams, chasing things they didn't love to impress people they didn't even know. Arav was 22, a university student with a mind full of ideas and a heart full of restlessness. He wanted to be someone to create something that mattered, to make his parents proud. But more than anything, he wanted to silence the voice that said he wasn't good enough. Every morning, he woke up to the same routine: college, assignments. Scrolling through success stories online, he admired people who had made it: entrepreneurs, creators, athletes, travelers. But every time he tried to start something of his own, fear wrapped around his courage like a chain. Maybe tomorrow, he would whisper, and tomorrow never came. His father, a school teacher, often said, Arav, the world doesn't reward dreamers. It rewards doers. But Arav didn't lack dreams. He lacked belief. He had failed twice already. Once in a competition he cared deeply about, and once in his own promise to stay consistent. The failures carved doubt into his mind like scars on stone. One evening, after another day wasted in front of his laptop doing nothing productive, he received a call from his childhood friend, Kabir. Arv, I'm going to the mountains next week. There's a small village where my uncle works as a teacher. You should come. Maybe it'll clear your head. Mountains. The word itself felt heavy, distant, powerful. At first, Aro laughed. Me in the mountains. I can barely climb stairs. Something inside him stirred. That same whisper again. Quiet but firm. Maybe it's time, he agreed. That night, as the city lights flickered outside his window, Arav looked at his reflection and said softly, I'm tired of being afraid of my own potential. He didn't know it then. But this trip would break him, rebuild him, and awaken a courage he never knew he had. The next week, Arav found himself on a rickety bus, winding up steep, mist-covered roads. The air grew colder, cleaner, almost like it wanted to wash away his city-made doubts. The village of Devgar sat at the base of a towering mountain range. The peaks looked endless, their white tips cutting through clouds like silent giants. Kabir's uncle, Mr. Ratan, was a calm, weathered man in his 50s. He greeted them with a smile that carried both wisdom and warmth. His home was small, but filled with books and quiet purpose. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Arav asked, Sir, don't you ever get bored living here, away from the world? Mr. Ratan chuckled. The world isn't in the city, my boy. It's in the climb and the patience to rise, even when no one's watching. Those words lingered. That night, Arav couldn't sleep. The wind howled through the trees and the mountains seemed alive, as if whispering, Come find yourself. The next morning, he decided to walk up the lower trail. He didn't plan to climb far, just enough to feel the mountain. But as he started walking, every step felt heavier than it should. His lungs burned, his legs screamed, and his thoughts mocked him. You can't even climb this. You'll never handle real challenges. He almost turned back. But then he saw an old shepherd sitting by a rock, watching the sunrise. The man smiled and said, The mountain tests everyone's sun. The question isn't whether you can reach the top, it's whether you'll take the next step. Something inside Arav shifted. He took one more step, then another. And when he reached a small ridge, he looked down. The village was small, distant, peaceful. He smiled. For the first time in years, he felt alive. He realized something simple yet profound. Courage doesn't come from winning. It comes from starting even when you might lose. That night, under a sky crowded with stars, Arav promised himself, I'll climb higher tomorrow. Not for anyone else, for me. The next morning, Arav rose before sunrise. The mountain air was sharp and clean, and the world felt quiet, almost sacred. The mist clung to the trees and the sky slowly blushed with light. For the first time in years, he felt purpose beating inside his chest. He packed a small bag, filled his bottle, and told Kabir, I'm going higher today. Kabir smiled. Just don't try to conquer the whole mountain in a day. I'm not here to conquer it, Arav said. I'm here to find out if I can face it. The trail started easy. Soft soil, bird song, sunlight filtering through leaves. But as he climbed, the air thinned, the ground turned to rock, and the wind began to bite. His legs ached, his lungs begged for rest, and sweat burned his eyes halfway up. He stopped to breathe. The view below was stunning, a sea of green valleys and silver rivers cutting through them. He smiled, whispering, "Maybe I can do this." But then, the path turned steep and cruel. Loose stones rolled under his feet. The trail narrowed to a thin ledge beside a drop that vanished into fog. His confidence faltered, he told himself. Just one more step, then it happened. His boot slipped. He fell hard, scraping his arm against the rocks. Pain tore through him. His water bottle rolled away, disappearing into the abyss below. For a long moment, just sat there, trembling, staring at his bleeding hand. The wind roared in his ears as if mocking him. You see? You're not made for this. You're just a dreamer who talks big. He clenched his fists. His thoughts turned dark. What am I doing here? I could have been safe at home, behind a screen, pretending I'm trying. He wanted to go back, but then he heard footsteps. An old shepherd again, the same one from the first day. The man stood quietly holding a stick, his eyes kind yet piercing. "So," the shepherd said, "you fell." "Yeah," Arav muttered, looking away. "Good," the man replied. "Now you've met the mountain properly." Arav frowned. "What's good about falling?" The old man smiled. "Falling teaches you two things, where your feet are weak and where your heart still stands strong. The mountain doesn't care about how fast you climb. It only asks one question. Will you rise after you fall?" The words hit Arav like thunder. He looked at his bleeding hand again. The pain was real, but so was the fire building inside him. He whispered almost to himself, "I will." Every step hurt, but he climbed again. Slower this time, more carefully, more deliberately. When he finally reached a flat clearing near the top ridge, he collapsed, exhausted, covered in dirt and sweat. But as he looked at the horizon, painted in gold and crimson, something inside him shifted. He realized it wasn't about reaching the top. It was about refusing to stop climbing. That night, when he returned to the village, Kabir was waiting. "You look like you fought a war." Kabir laughed. "I did," Arav said quietly, "and I'm still fighting it." Mr. Ratan, sitting by the fire, looked at him with pride. "Pain is not your enemy. Arav, it's the proof that you're still alive, still trying. Most people avoid pain, that's why they never grow." Arav didn't sleep much that night. His mind replayed every step, every fall, every word the shepherd said. For the first time, he didn't fear failure. He respected it. He wrote in his journal, "Today I learned, courage isn't loud. It's the quiet breath you take right after you fall." The next few days in Devgar passed slowly, like pages turning in an old book. The mountain loomed in the distance, tall, quiet, and patient. Every morning, its peaks caught the first light before the rest of the world woke. Arav would sit by the window of Mr. Ratton's house and just watch. There was something about the mountain that fascinated him now. It was no longer just a challenge. It was a mirror. A mirror that showed him who he was and who he could become. His wounds from the fall had begun to heal, but the ache in his muscles still reminded him of his weakness and his strength. That morning, as Kabir left to visit a nearby town, Arav stayed behind. He found Mr. Ratan sitting under an old pine tree, reading a worn-out book. "You're quiet these days," the old man said without looking up. "I'm thinking," Arav replied. "About what?" "About failure. About patience. About why I keep starting things and never finishing them." Mr. Ratan closed his book, smiled gently, and said, "Do you know what the wind teaches, Arav?" Arav frowned. "The wind." "Yes, the wind never stops moving. It bends, it changes, but it never gives up. It learns the shape of every mountain, every valley. It doesn't fight the path, it flows with it. That's patience. Rav listened carefully. You see, the old man continued, people from cities live fast. They chase speed, not depth. They want results, not roots. But life is not a race. It's a climb. And the higher you go, the slower it gets. Something about those words sank deep inside Arav for years. He had lived in a world that rewarded instant success, likes, followers, grades, results. But here, in the silence of the mountains, time moved differently. Growth wasn't visible every day. Yet it was always happening quietly, patiently, like the wind shaping the rocks. That afternoon, Arav went out alone to explore a narrow trail leading toward a small waterfall. The wind howled softly through the pines, and each step echoed in the emptiness. He sat near the waterfall, closed his eyes and listened to the sound of rushing water, to the wind brushing against the leaves, to the stillness of his own breath. In that moment, something clicked inside him. He realized he had always been in a hurry, desperate to succeed before even understanding what success meant. He wanted the fruit but never cared for the soil. He whispered to himself, patience isn't waiting. It's working quietly, believing the result will come. As he sat there, a group of village children appeared, carrying bundles of sticks. They waved and smiled. Arav noticed one of them, a little boy, maybe 10 years old, struggling to climb the rocky slope with his heavy bundle. He kept slipping but never stopped trying. Arav ran to help him, but the boy shook his head. No, Baya, he said, panting. I can do it. The boy finally reached the top, his face bright with pride. Arav smiled, realizing he had just witnessed a living example of what Mr. Rattan meant. When he returned home that evening, he told the story to Mr. Urton. The old man nodded. Now you see, Arav, patience is not weakness. It's strength wearing calmness. That night, as the wind sang through the mountains, Arav sat by the window again. He looked at the stars, countless, silent, eternal, and thought about all the people who give up right before their dawn. He whispered into the dark, won't give up this time. No matter how slow, no matter how long. He didn't realize it yet, but that small promise would one day become the foundation of his new life, the day his patience turned into courage, and his courage into purpose. The wind outside roared again, not as a storm, but as applause. The following morning, Arav woke to a heavy fog that had settled over the village. The mountain peaks were hidden behind thick clouds, as if the world itself was testing his resolve. He had decided to climb higher that day, beyond the trails he had known, into a part of the mountain called the Valley of Echoes, a narrow gorge where every sound bounced back 1,000-fold. Arav packed his bag with the few supplies he had, a notebook, some water, and a small lunch. He told himself, this is the day I face my fears. As he entered the valley, the silence pressed on him. The wind here was colder, carrying whispers that seemed almost human. Every footstep on the gravelly path echoed back like a question. Who are you? What are you doing here? At first, the echoes scared him. He slowed down, his hands gripping rocks for support. Doubts crept into his mind. Maybe I'm not strong enough. Maybe I can't do this. Then he remembered the shepherd's words. The mountain doesn't care if you fall. It only asks if you will rise. Arav closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and continued. The valley was deceptively beautiful. Mist curled around jagged rocks, and small streams sparkled like liquid silver. But with beauty came danger. A sudden loose rock sent him sliding down a few feet, scraping his knee. Pain shot through him, and for a moment he wanted to give up. But he pressed on. Every step became a conversation between him and himself. Every echo a mirror, reflecting his fears. I am weak. I am afraid. I will never make it then, almost imperceptibly. The echoes began to change. Instead of mocking him, they sounded like encouragement. You can. Keep moving. Don't stop. It was the mountain itself speaking, teaching him that the valley was not just a place, but a test of his inner strength. Hours passed. The climb grew steeper. He reached a section where the path narrowed into a thin ledge over a chasm. One misstep would send him tumbling. His heart pounded in his chest. For the first time in his life, Ara felt the full weight of responsibility, not just to himself, but to his dreams, to his life. He stopped, took out his notebook, and wrote, "Fear is not the enemy. It's the compass. It shows where courage must grow," continued. Step by step, his body trembling, his mind screaming to turn back. But deep inside, a quiet voice urged him forward. Finally, he reached the heart of the valley. A small plateau opened before him, bathed in sunlight that had pierced through the fog. The view was breathtaking. Mountains rolled endlessly in every direction, rivers weaving through valleys like silver threads, and the clouds hung low, almost within reach. Arav sat on a rock, exhausted, bleeding, but alive. The valley had tested him, stripped him down to his core, shown him who he truly was. He realized something profound. The mountain doesn't give gifts. It only reveals them. The strength I already have, the patience I had forgotten, the courage I never knew existed. He stayed there for a long while, letting the wind and echoes wash over him. In the silence, he felt reborn. When he returned to the village that evening, he walked differently. His shoulders were straighter, his eyes brighter, and his heart lighter. The villagers noticed it. "Even Kabir, you've changed," Kabir said. "The mountain changed me," Raf replied quietly. Mr. Ratan smiled knowingly. "The valley strips you bare so you can build yourself anew. Remember this, Arav. The echoes you hear today will guide the voices you hear tomorrow." That night, Arav slept under the window, listening to the stars and the mountain wind. He dreamed not of fame or money, but of the climb itself, the journey of becoming the person he was meant to be. The Valley of Echoes had given him a gift far greater than any peak. The first taste of unyielding courage and patient persistence. The morning Arav set out for the next leg of his journey. The sky was dark and heavy with clouds. A storm was coming, one that had turned the mountain path slick and dangerous. Yet instead of fear, Arav felt anticipation. After all, he had endured in the Valley of Echoes. This storm seemed like another test, a challenge to push his courage and patience to the limit. Kabir had warned him beyond the valley. The trail crosses the bridge of storms. It's not a bridge made of wood, but of narrow cliffs, loose stones, and raging winds. Many try and fail. Few make it across. Arav nodded. He understood that the storm would not just test his body, but his mind. Every time he felt fear, every time his legs wanted to give out, would have to remind himself why he was here. The first steps onto the bridge were unnerving. A narrow path clung to the side of a cliff, with jagged rocks jutting out like teeth. Below, clouds swirled, hiding the valley floor. The wind howled, tugging at him like invisible hands. Each step required concentration and trust in his own strength. Halfway across, a sudden gust nearly threw him off balance. Arav's heart raced, and the fear he had worked so hard to contain surged back with a vengeance. Maybe I'm not ready. Maybe this is too much. He stumbled, nearly falling, but a hand grabbed his shoulder, an instinctive reflex, though there was no one there. He realized it was his own courage holding him upright, the culmination of all the small victories he had earned in the valley. In the falls and the long nights of self-doubt, he breathed deeply. He whispered to himself, step by step, one foot in front of the other. "I won't stop." The storm raged harder. Rain soaked his clothes, chilled him to the bone, and made every rock slippery. But Arav forced himself to keep moving, trusting the rhythm of his breath, trusting the strength he had ignored for so long. Hours passed. The wind shrieked like 1,000 voices, but gradually the clouds parted and the sun began to pierce through the gray. Arav finally reached the end of the bridge of storms, drenched, exhausted, but standing tall. He looked back at the path he had crossed. The stones slick with rain, the wind still howling over the cliffs. And he realized the truth. The bridge had not just tested him, it had transformed him. Courage, whispered, is not the absence of fear. It is moving forward despite the fear. That evening, as he returned to the village, Araf sat silently under the old pine tree with Mr. Rattan. "You faced the storm today," the old man said. "It almost broke me," Araf admitted. "Exactly," Mr. Rattan replied. "The storm is not there to break you. It is there to reveal the strength you didn't know existed." That night, Arav wrote in his journal, his hands shaking from exhaustion and rain, "Patience is the soil. Courage is the seed. Only when they grow together can you withstand the storms." For the first time, he realized that the mountain had become more than a physical challenge. It was a reflection of life itself, full of obstacles, storms and tests, but also of beauty, strength, and quiet victories. As the wind howled outside and the rain tapped against the roof, Arav slept deeply, carrying with him a newfound certainty: no storm in the mountains or in life could stop the one who refused to give up. The next morning, Arav awoke to a pale golden light spilling over the mountain peaks. The storm had passed, leaving behind wet rocks, glistening leaves, and a quiet that felt almost sacred. He felt different, stronger, yet still humble. He had crossed the Valley of Echoes and the Bridge of Storms. But something told him the true test was yet to come. Kabir had suggested a new path, one that led toward the summit of the highest peak visible from the village. Arav packed lightly, but his heart was heavy with anticipation. He knew this climb would not just be about muscles or endurance. It would be about the choices he made when no one else was watching. After hours of careful climbing, along jagged rocks and narrow ledges, Arav reached a sharp cliff edge overlooking a vast expanse of valleys, streams, and forests. The view was breathtaking, but it also felt intimidating. He paused, looking at the path ahead, which seemed almost vertical. Disappearing into the clouds above, suddenly he noticed a figure sitting on a rock near the cliff's edge. A man, old yet energetic, with a calm presence that seemed to blend with the mountains themselves. He wore simple clothes, his hair streaked with silver, and a long staff rested beside him. Arav approached cautiously. "Hello," he said. Unsure if the man would respond, the stranger smiled warmly. "I've been waiting for you," he said. Arav froze. "Waiting for me?" "Yes, the mountain tells me when someone is ready. You have walked through fear, patience, and storms. Now it is time for a lesson you cannot learn alone." Arav sat across from him, curiosity and awe filling his chest. "Who are you?" Arav asked. "Call me Varone," the man replied. "I am someone who has climbed these mountains many times, not for the peaks, but to understand the climb within." Varun began to speak slowly, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "Every person carries two mountains inside them. One is visible, the obstacles, the doubts, the failures. The other is invisible, courage, patience, resilience. Most people spend their lives trying to move the outside mountain, fighting what they cannot change. Few realize that the real climb is within." Arav listened, captivated. His mind flashed back to every fall, every fear, every moment he almost gave up. He realized Varun was speaking about him, his struggle, his hesitation, his dreams. "You have already faced the storms," Varun continued. "But the final summit requires more than strength. It requires belief in yourself, in the unseen. In the quiet voice that tells you to take the next step, even when the world screams stop." Arav swallowed hard. "But what if I fail? What if I fall again?" Varun's eyes glimmered. "Then you fall with purpose and rise with understanding. Failure is not your enemy. It is your guide. The moment you stop fearing it, you stop being afraid of life itself." For hours, they spoke about courage, patience, dreams, and the choices that define a person. Arav felt something he had never felt before: clarity. Before leaving, Varun handed him a small stone, smooth and warm from the sun. "Carry this with you. When the climb seems impossible, hold it. Remember, mountains are only as steep as the fear you carry. Let the stone remind you of your strength." Arav nodded silently, feeling a quiet fire ignite in his chest. He thanked Varen, who simply smiled and disappeared along a hidden path. As mysteriously as he had appeared, that evening, Arif sat by the fire, gazing at the stars. He held the stone tightly in his hand, thinking, I am ready. I will climb. I will not stop. I will become the person I am meant to be. The first time, fear no longer dictated his steps. Instead, courage, patience, and belief filled the empty spaces inside him. The mountain had shown him storms, echoes, and trials. And now, through the stranger on the cliff, it had revealed its deepest secret. The summit is never above the clouds. It is inside the heart of the one who climbs. Arav woke before dawn. The small stone Varen had given him warm in his pocket. The mountain lay shrouded in mist, silent and imposing, yet somehow inviting. Today, he told himself, he would climb to the summit. Not just the mountain's peak, but the summit within himself, the place where courage, patience, and determination lived, unshaken by fear or failure. The trail was steep, rough, and treacherous. Each step demanded focus. Every breath pulled the cold, thin air into his lungs. The sun had not yet risen, but the first streaks of gold broke through the clouds. Illuminating the path ahead like a promise, Arav thought about every lesson he had learned so far. The fire beneath the silence, the call of the mountain, the fall, and the pain. The valley of echoes, the bridge of storms, and the wisdom of the stranger on the cliff. Every memory was a stepping stone, every struggle a part of his preparation. Hours passed. His legs ached, his fingers were raw from gripping rocks, and the wind threatened to throw him off balance. At one point he slipped, nearly falling off a ledge. For a split second, fear surged, but then he touched the stone in his pocket. He felt Varen's words echo in his mind. Mountains are only as steep as the fear you carry. Let courage guide your steps. He stood taller, lifted his chin, and continued. As the sun rose fully, the mist began to clear. Arav reached a narrow ridge that overlooked a vast panorama of mountains. Valleys and rivers stretching endlessly into the horizon. The view was breathtaking, but it was also humbling. He realized how small he was, not insignificant, but part of something far greater than himself. Finally, after hours of relentless climbing, he arrived at the summit. Cold winds whipped around him, but Arav felt no fear. He stood at the highest point, looking down at the clouds below, the valleys far beneath, the path he had conquered. And then he understood. The summit was never about being above the mountains. It was about mastering the mountains within the doubts, the fears, the moments when giving up seemed easier than moving forward. He sat down, exhausted but triumphant. He closed his eyes, letting the wind carry away every ounce of self-doubt and hesitation. For the first time in his life, he felt complete. He was no longer the boy who waited for tomorrow, afraid to start. He was a man who faced the storm, embraced the fall, listened to the echoes, and climbed the impossible. Arav whispered into the wind, I am stronger than my fears. I am braver than my doubts. I will never stop climbing. Below, the valleys and rivers gleamed like silver ribbons, and the sun cast its golden light over the mountains. Arav realized that life itself was like this mountain full of obstacles. Storms and fears, but also full of beauty, growth, and triumph for those who dare to keep climbing. He took a deep breath and lifted his arms toward the sky, feeling a surge of energy, clarity, and purpose, unlike anything he had ever known. The summit was not just a place, it was a transformation. And Arav knew, deep in his heart, that this was only the beginning. That night, as he slept under the stars, Arav felt a sense of peace he had never felt in the city. He had faced himself and emerged stronger, ready to face life with the courage and patience he had cultivated on the mountain. The summit within was his, and with it, he carried a lesson he would never forget. True victory is not reaching the peak. It is rising every time you fall, believing every step, and never stopping until you discover the strength you never knew existed. The morning after reaching the summit, Arav woke to a quiet golden light. The wind had calmed and the mountains seemed at peace, as if it were satisfied with his journey so far. But the climb was only half the story. The descent awaited a path often more dangerous than the climb itself, testing not just strength, but wisdom, patience, and humility. Arov packed his small bag, held the stone Varen had given him, and began the slow journey down. The trail was steep, uneven, and slippery from the rain of previous days. Each step required careful attention. One careless move could undo all he had achieved. At first, the descent felt easier than the climb. Gravity seemed to help him, carrying him toward the valleys below. But soon he realized that moving downward brought new challenges. His legs burned from tension. His mind wavered, and the temptation to rush, to take shortcuts, gnawed at him as he navigated a particularly narrow ledge. Arav's mind drifted back to the city he had left behind, the crowded streets, the constant noise, the distractions, and the people who had doubted him. He thought about his old life of procrastination, fear, and hesitation. The contrast was stark. Arov stopped and whispered to himself, "I cannot carry my old self down this mountain. The person I am now must face the world below." The clouds began to lift, and he saw the village in the distance, familiar yet transformed in his eyes. Each home, each field, each winding road looked different. It wasn't the village that had changed. It was him. Halfway down, he stumbled over a loose stone and fell, scraping his hands and knees. Pain shot through him, but he did not cry out. He remembered every fall he had endured on the climb, every storm, every echo, every step that had seemed impossible. And he rose again. "It's not about never falling," he whispered. "It's about standing up, no matter how many times I do." The lower trail led him through forests, streams, and finally, open meadows. He encountered villagers who were surprised to see him return so quickly and safely. They looked at him with curiosity, noting the confidence in his stride, the calm determination in his eyes. Arav realized something important. The descent was a metaphor for life. Often, the most difficult part of growth is returning to the world you left behind, armed with courage, patience, and strength, and applying it where it matters. When he finally reached the village square, Kabir ran to him, eyes wide. "You made it. I didn't think anyone could climb that high and come back." Arav laughed, not out of pride, but out of realization. "It's not about proving it to anyone," he said. "It's about proving it to myself." That evening, he sat with Mr. Rattan by the fire. The old man studied him quietly. "You have climbed, Arav, but now the real challenge begins. The city, the distractions, the doubts, they are mountains too, and you will face them every day." Arav nodded, understanding the truth in his mentor's words. The mountain had given him courage and patience, but life below required him to nurture them every day, in every small decision, in every step toward his dreams. He wrote in his journal that night, "The descent is not a retreat. It is a test of whether what you have learned can survive the pressures of the world. The mountain taught me patience, courage, and resilience. Now it is time to carry them into life." The stars twinkled above, silent witnesses to his transformation. Ara felt a deep sense of readiness. He knew that no matter what obstacles awaited him back in the city, failed attempts, criticisms, or setbacks, he had climbed his own inner mountain, and that inner summit would never leave him. For the first time, Arav understood that the climb never truly ends. Life would always present new peaks, storms, and valleys, but the courage and patience he had forged would guide him through every challenge. Arav returned to the city with the mountains still alive in his heart. The streets, once familiar and suffocating, now seemed different, not smaller, but alive with challenges he was finally ready to face. The honking cars, the crowded buses, the endless notifications on his phone, they were noise he could now rise above. At first, life was not easy. Old habits clung to him like shadows. He found himself tempted to sleep late, procrastinate, and avoid the hard work he had promised himself on the mountain. But each time he wavered, he remembered the wind in the Valley of Echoes, the storm on the Bridge of Storms, the stranger on the cliff, and the stone he carried in his pocket Every challenge in the city became a mountain of its own. The assignments he once avoided, the presentations he feared, the projects that intimidated him, he approached them with patience, step by step, as if each were a ledge on a vast peak. Weeks turned into months. Arav worked tirelessly, sometimes failing, sometimes succeeding, but never stopping. Slowly, the results began to show. Grades improved, friends noticed his focus, and even his parents saw a fire in him they had never seen before. Then came the moment that would shock him and change everything. Arav had been working on a project for weeks, an initiative to help students in his university overcome procrastination and fear. Inspired by his own journey, he decided to present it at a major seminar. He spoke nervously at first, but as he shared his story of the mountain, the falls, the storms, the valley of echoes, the bridge of storms, the stranger on the cliff, something incredible happened. The audience listened, not just politely, but with attention, with awe. Students leaned forward, taking notes, nodding, and wiping tears from their eyes. When RF finished, the hall erupted in applause. At that moment, we realized something shocking. His struggle, his patience, his courage, they had become a beacon for others. His failure had become the foundation of someone else's hope. A teacher approached him after the seminar, his tears in her eyes. "Arav, your story. It changed me. I've been afraid to chase my dreams. But now, I see that courage isn't about never falling. It's about standing up over and over." Arav smiled, holding the small stone in his pocket. It was worn smooth from months of carrying it, a reminder of the mountains and storms he had survived. He walked home that evening through the city streets, no longer overwhelmed by them, but energized by the challenges they represented. He understood, finally, that the mountain had never been a place. It had been a journey of transformation, one that could be carried into every corner of his life. That night, Arif wrote in his journal, a message not just for himself, but for every student and young dreamer watching the horizon of possibility. Life will always present mountains. You will fall. You will doubt. You will face storms that seem impossible. But courage and patience once forged will guide you through. The summit is not the peak you reach, but the person you become along the way. Do not wait for tomorrow. Begin now. Fail, rise, and keep climbing. The fire in your heart is stronger than any obstacle, and when you finally share your journey, you will realize your struggles were never wasted. They were the path to greatness. Arav placed the stone on his desk, looking at it one last time before turning off the light. Outside, the city hummed with life, but for the first time, he felt truly awake. He had faced his fears, embraced patience, and discovered courage. And in that moment, he knew no storm, no valley, no bridge, and no failure could ever hold him back again. The mountain had given him a gift greater than victory. It had given him himself.